The following is a Shaw TV Public Affairs presentation. Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Joanna Groves, and joining us today is Carole James. She's the MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill, and she's also the Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier for the province of BC. Thank you for being here, Carole.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great. So I'd like to start off. I understand you had a busy summer.
It was an incredible summer and not the usual kind of busy. No holidays for anyone on our side this summer. As the public knows, politics are never boring in British Columbia. We had an incredible summer where we now have a minority New Democrat government in partnership with the Green Caucus. So it was an incredible summer and a real honor to be appointed into the cabinet. And certainly full on, weekdays, weekends. I'm grateful that I live close to the legislature. It means I can come into work quite easily, but an incredibly busy time, an incredibly challenging time, but an incredibly rewarding time as well.
I bet. I know a lot of our viewers are going to be wondering what it was like negotiating with the Green MLAs.
Again, a real privilege to be able to be not only appointed to cabinet, but actually to be asked to be part of the negotiations along with the Premier with the Green Caucus. I really feel like a part of history happened during those negotiations. We had the opportunity to talk about values, to talk about things that we agreed on. And I think that's what's so important and so historic about this agreement, is that we had values we agreed with, and the Greens had values they agreed with, and we built those into an agreement. So it didn't mean coming to compromise on issues. We in fact both believed in childcare, for example. We both believed in affordable housing. We both believed in climate change. We were able to take those values, build them into an agreement, and say that we were going to give the people of British Columbia a good, balanced approach to government. Good government, long-term, stable government, with good ideas coming from all kinds of places, including the Green Caucus, and I hope eventually including the official opposition and the Liberal Caucus as well. So a great piece of history, and I think is going to provide British Columbians with a very long-term, good, stable government.
Mm-hmm. And what were you hearing from members of the community when that was happening?
Well, they were certainly excited. I think everyone was in anticipation, as all of we were. People joke that, you prepare the speech on election night for winning and losing. You're ready for both. You're not ready for a maybe. And that's really with minority governments. The time that it takes to make sure that the people in the legislature who are elected come together and then determine who has the confidence of the House. That's what we did, and that's what we're moving ahead on. So I think the public in British Columbia is excited. I think they're excited about the opportunity for new approaches, for good ideas to come from a variety of places and be brought to the legislature and to be brought to good government on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. So now you're Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier. Can you tell us what that's been like?
What an extraordinary experience. Again, a real honor and a real privilege to serve the people of British Columbia, certainly the people in my constituency, but the people of the province as well. An incredible time to come in, because you come in the summertime, which means you have to prepare a budget that normally takes about 4 to 5 months in about 6 weeks. So we prepared a budget. We did public accounts from the previous government. The day after the budget was tabled in September, we're now preparing for the February budget. So it was right from one budget to the other. So an incredible learning curve. But I'm very blessed by a strong team, incredible staff in the Ministry of Finance, and a strong caucus and cabinet. So you really saw our team hit the ground running. And I'm so proud of the work we've been able to do. It hasn't even been 100 days yet that we've been in government, and we've already been able to make changes on behalf of the public, and that's what we got elected for. That's what people asked for, and so that's an incredible honor.
Absolutely. I know you mentioned the budget update. Can you tell us what people can expect to see coming out of that?
I can, and that really was the exciting part, was to actually see the kinds of decisions that we made, the kinds of promises and commitments we made in the election come out in the budget. So for example, one of the very first actions, in fact, I think it was our very first action as cabinet when we met, was to increase income assistance rates and rates for people with disabilities by $100 a month. That's the first significant increase in over 10 years. We know that will make a difference. It's not going to solve all of the poverty issues. It's not going to resolve everything for people, but it will make a real difference in their lives. One of the other early decisions we made was to get rid of tuition for adult basic education and English language learning. Again, to have a real impact on individuals, to be able to go back to school, to improve their skills, to get better paying jobs, support their families, and contribute to the economy. So a win for everyone. To be able to see those kinds of differences made in the budget was, as I said, quite extraordinary, and I think more to come. It was a budget where we brought forward what I call the basics of government: education, healthcare, housing, the kinds of things that are routine, and then put some very key investments in that we were able to do in this budget update that will then carry on to February's budget. So it's a taste of the kinds of things and kinds of commitments we've made to show people that we're serious, that we have priorities, and we'll then do more when it comes to February's budget.
Absolutely. I know a big issue in your community is the opioid overdose crisis. What can people see out of the budget update regarding that issue?
Well, again, if you take a look at the number of deaths, I mean, one death is too many, but if you look at the number of deaths we've seen across this province, and particularly here in Greater Victoria, we have very high numbers when you look at our population and compare it. It is a crisis, and when you have a crisis, you need to put the resources in place to be able to address it. And so we put resources into the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, another area that I'm so proud of. We now have a minister who gets up every day and who is focused on addressing the issue of mental health and addictions. That's an amazing thing for us to be able to have done. So her ministry has now been formed, is in place. They'll set the direction to be able to provide the support for people. And then the programs and services will be provided through the Ministry of Health. So we increased the Ministry of Health's budget, and we've included supports for treatment, for more naloxone kits, supports for people who are providing the frontline service. So that's everyone from paramedics and ambulance attendants to outreach workers who are on the street every day doing the difficult job of addressing overdoses. So support for those individuals. Support for the Solicitor General's office so that they can actually make sure that we deal with frontline dealers and try and get the drugs off the street. More support for recovery. So people, when they need help, when they ask, will get help fast. That's one of the key principles that we're looking at. And then again, long-term recovery for people who get their detox, who go in and then need longer-term recovery. There's beginning supports in that area as well. So I'm really glad that we're able to put those extra resources in for a 3-year period in the budget that will begin to address the crisis. More to be done. Education is a big piece that needs to be out there. And then support for targeted groups that are really facing challenges. For example, young men. Aboriginal communities, First Nations communities have a disproportionate number of people who are facing overdoses. We're going to put some resources into those communities as well.
Yeah, it's a very important issue, absolutely. I know another big issue in your community is, along with poverty, is the housing crisis. Affordable housing, both for people who rent and for people who want to purchase a home. So what's been happening with that issue?
It's probably one of the biggest issues that I think our province faces, is the lack of affordability when it comes to housing. And I think it's also important to recognize that it's not simply the issue of people from street to homes. That's critical. We have a homeless crisis that has to be addressed. But we're now facing issues for teachers and firefighters and paramedics and people in communities who you need to live and work in their communities who also can't find affordable housing. And so we began the first steps in the September budget update while we develop a comprehensive housing strategy over the fall. So we're doing a lot of work. I'm working with the Minister of Housing to put together a plan that you'll see start to be implemented in February, in the February's budget. But in the meantime, we wanted to show people that we were serious. So there are 3 initiatives in this budget in September. The first one is putting more money into the residential tenancy branch. If there's one issue that I think probably has been top of mind for people in our constituency, it's been the long waits when they have a problem with a landlord, or a landlord has a problem with a tenant, because it's both individuals can have challenges. So we put more money in to try and deal with the backlog, to get rid of the complaints that are there, because it's not good for anyone to have those complaints linger, and also for enforcement. So more money put in place for enforcement. We're also building modular homes. And these are going to be, they're out right now into communities to see which communities are ready to be able to look at modular homes. Those are for people who are on the street who can move to housing. The real advantage of modular housing is that it's fast. You don't need to wait for the buildings in the same kind of way you do if you're starting from scratch. They're mobile, so if you don't have the need a few years from now, it can be moved to somewhere else. So they're very cost effective, and you can move them up quickly. So that's another big piece. And then the third piece on housing is to build rental housing that is purpose-built. So will stay as rental housing. And again, this is going to be for everyone from families to seniors to individuals in communities. They're going to be all over the province, so it's not simply a Lower Mainland or a Victoria area issue. It's going to go across the province. And again, is going to make a huge difference. So that's a big start. For February, we're looking at everything from all of the tax loopholes that are out there, all of the opportunities to be able to look at speculation taxes and foreign buyers tax and the issue of short-term rentals. All of those pieces are going to be considered for the February budget, and we'll come up with a comprehensive plan, because this is too important to piecemeal, to put one part in place and not the others. We want to do this right, we want it to be long-term, and we want it to make a difference.
Okay, and it's certainly a very important issue. Have you been hearing much from your constituents about the housing issue?
It's probably, as I said, one of the biggest issues. We've had some renovictions in Victoria, Beacon Hill, that have been a real problem. Buildings that were bought by an owner that doesn't live in the area, and trying to push people out, doing renovations in buildings that, in fact, are taking forever. People have been a year without the use of their balconies, with their buildings shrouded, with windows covered, just really unacceptable kinds of behaviors. And we worked very hard, and I worked very hard as the MLA to try and address those issues. We managed to get some changes, but I think ultimately having the supports in the residential tenancy branch, being able to enforce the rules when someone breaks them, whether it's a landlord or whether it's a tenant, everybody has to follow the rules, and to have the resources to be able to deal with people who are breaking the rules, I think is going to make a big difference. When you look at Victoria, for example, we're at a 0.03 vacancy rate. We've dropped, we have practically no vacancies. So even if people have money, they're not able to find a place to rent. We need to increase supply, we need to deal with the demand, we need to address it in a comprehensive approach. And I'm really proud of the work we've begun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the low vacancy rate is a huge issue. And have you heard from any of your constituents about the fixed term lease loophole? Because I've heard that's an issue as well.
It's certainly an issue, more so in Vancouver, but also we've heard it here as well, where people take the advantage of a fixed term. They say it's the end of the year. They try and extend the lease, and therefore try and work their way around the amount that they're allowed to increase rent. So it gives people, again, an opportunity to increase the rent outside of the rules. Mm-hmm. And that's a piece that I hope people will stay tuned. We'll have an announcement very soon on that issue. It's something we know needs to be addressed, and it's a piece that we're taking on.
Okay, we have a few more minutes before the break. I'd like to talk about some of the other things that we saw in the budget update. Was there anything for small business?
In fact, it's one of the areas, again, where we are very proud in this budget to decrease the small business tax. We've dropped it down by 0.5 percentage point to 2%, second lowest in all of Canada, because we know the contribution that small businesses make to our economy, the contribution they make when it comes to employees and the number of hirings, the contribution they make in ensuring that the local economy keeps humming with money circulating through businesses. So to be able to make a difference for small businesses, to be able to support them by dropping the small business corporate tax rate is, again, a good step in the right direction to continue to increase employment and continue to see those dollars circulate through our communities.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a bit about the announcement going back to education around former kids in care?
Again, there's a long list of things we've done in less than 100 days. We announced that you will see all universities and colleges provide tuition free for children who've been children in care for
That's
a period
wonderful.
of time. Again, talk about making a difference for individuals. These are children who government has been their parent. I think people forget that sometimes, that when you're a foster child, the government legally is your parent. Well, I know very few parents who wouldn't try as hard as they could to put resources aside for their children and try and encourage them to go to university or college or get training of some kind. So for government to take on that responsibility as a parent is the right thing to do, and will again provide support, because the numbers of children in care who end up on the street or end up on income assistance because they don't have the supports is huge. If we can provide them with education, if they have the opportunity to become tax-paying citizens and lead positive lives, that's going to be a benefit for all of us. So a really good initiative. Again, good for the children in care, good for the economy.
Yeah, education really is key.
No question, no question, and a real priority of our Premier. If anyone's heard our Premier talk about his experience in education and the teacher who got him back on the right track when he was hanging around outside school, got him on the basketball team, got him involved in academics, will know the passion that he brings and the passion that all of us in our caucus and in our cabinet bring to education. It really is the future. And again, another huge investment, if you're looking at a large investment, over $600 million over 3 years into the K-12 system in education to try and make a difference for the years of neglect. We've had children who've gone through 16 years, who've gone through 13 years of their education, 16 years of this past government, and who have not seen the supports they need to thrive. Every child should have an opportunity to thrive, so putting those resources in will make a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, can you tell us briefly, have you been hearing positive things from the community?
It's been great. People have been very excited. There's real hope. People are feeling good. It's a wonderful time.
Oh, that's great. Well, we have to take a short break. We've been talking with Carole James, Victoria Beacon Hill MLA, and Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier. If you'd like to get a hold of Carole, we're going to be putting her contact details up on the screen, so get your pen and paper ready, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Constituency Report on Shaw TV. We've been talking with MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill, Carole James, who's also Minister of Finance and Deputy Premier. Thanks again for being here, Carole.
Thank you.
Thanks. So before the break, we were talking about the budget update and some of the important issues that you're seeing in your community. And I know that poverty is such a huge one. So can you tell me a little bit more about what we're seeing for poverty reduction?
I can, and it's one of the pieces of legislation when I was very first elected in 2005 by the people of Victoria Beacon Hill, that I introduced a piece of legislation to put in place a poverty reduction plan in our province. It was never accepted by the previous government, and in fact, we are the only province left now in the country that doesn't have a poverty reduction plan. So it was one of the pieces, again, that is built into our September budget update, was the money to get that kick-started, to begin the process of implementing a poverty reduction plan across our province. It's again an issue where we need to look at it broadly. Poverty reduction isn't simply income assistance rates or isn't simply addressing one piece. It's looking at the continuum. It's everything from housing to income assistance rates to education. all of the supports necessary for people to get out of the cycle of poverty. And again, it's the right thing to do economically, because growing inequality is not good for the economy, and it's certainly not good for the individuals.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the high numbers we faced in British Columbia, 1 in 5 children at one time living in poverty in our province, we were always first or second worst, not the times you want to be first or second when it came to poverty rates. So we're getting that going. The Minister of Social Development has started the process for a poverty reduction plan. Again, we're not going to solve it overnight, like so many of the issues. I think one of the biggest challenges we really face is that after 16 years, there's a lot to fix. There are a lot of issues that have to be addressed, and we can't fix them overnight. But I always say that doesn't mean we shouldn't get started. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't show people where we're heading and take the steps to get there. So it may not be as fast as some people hope. We might not be able to do everything overnight, but we're getting started, and we're beginning to address the real needs of our province. And I'm really proud of the fact that there are 3 priorities that we're really focused on. Affordability being one, and we've talked a little bit about the housing and the adult basic education issues. We're focused on improving services and supports. So again, that fits with healthcare, that fits with other areas that we're talking about. And then building a long-term sustainable economy, which again, an economy built simply on real estate speculation isn't going to be a long-term gain. We want to build long-term sustainable economic development, and there are a couple of pieces in the budget on that as well.
Absolutely. And as far you were talking about it, step by step, we have to, it takes time to get there. Can you tell me about some of the steps for people who are on income assistance and disability income assistance?
I can, and the first one, of course, as I mentioned earlier, was the issue of the increase in the rates, and that was a first important step, to increase them by $100 a month.
And that was done on day 2, wasn't it?
That was done on day 2, a big important piece of action from our government. And the second piece that we talked about again in the campaign, and that certainly was, I think, if I look at a long list of areas where the previous government failed British Columbians, I think one of the worst examples was getting rid of the disability bus pass. It was just cruel. There was really no need to do it. It caused such difficulties for people with disabilities. Often the only access they had to get out of the house, to get to appointments, or to be active in their community, to perhaps do a few hours of volunteer work if they were able to do that. So we announced again as part of this transition in as government that we will return the disabilities bus pass. We're not able to do it till January 1st, again because of the delay of getting into government. But again, what a step to be able to know that we're bringing that back. We're giving people the kind of freedom that they need, and no money will be clawed back from the check. This will be additional resources coming to each individual. They'll have a choice of whether they want the bus pass or not, but these will be additional dollars. It won't be money clawed back from their disabilities check.
That's wonderful. And that was one of the commitments from the last campaign. So moving on to some other of the commitments, I understand this session there's a bill before the House to get big money out of BC politics.
And I think most of the public will be looking at that and saying, finally, finally. Again, BC was known as the Wild West across our country, a very poor reputation because of big money. No limits. The previous government refused to look at limits on spending. They refused to look at limits on third parties who would advertise before the election. And, whether it's real or perceived, the public believes that if you give money, that you get something back for it, particularly large donations, and particularly large donations that were coming in during the election time period. So I'm, again, really pleased to know that we brought in legislation that's being debated about banning big money in politics, about making a change, about bringing the public back into democracy, which is really what they expect, what they want to happen. We will completely ban union and corporate donations. Individual donations will be capped at $1,200 a year, which again is one of the lowest across this country, which will make a huge difference. Public financing will be introduced, and it will be phased out over the years. And so again, that'll give a time for the transition out of big money. So a very big step, and a very overdue in British Columbia. And a huge thank you to all the groups and organizations who fought so hard to help this happen. They've been extraordinary, and they've been very patient. And I'm glad when we got to to be government, we were able to make the difference.
Absolutely. And it really is about restoring the public's confidence in the democratic system.
It really is. You know, there were two key pieces, and both of them now have been introduced in the legislature that really had to do with the public and democracy. One of them was banning big money, and the other, of course, is electoral reform, giving an opportunity for the public to have a say around changing the way we vote and making every vote count. If it's one of the issues, again, that I hear most often, it's the fact that people will say, I don't feel like my vote counts. It doesn't matter. First past the post doesn't give an opportunity for my vote to make a difference. So we've introduced legislation that will bring forward in the fall in 2018 a referendum where people will have a chance through a mail-in ballot. It's going to be a mail-in ballot. They'll have a chance to be able to have a say on their electoral system. Do they want to move to proportional representation? Do they want to get rid of first past the post and have their votes count? And I think it's going to be a very vigorous campaign. I've heard lots of good discussion already, met with a number of people in my community. I'm a big supporter of proportional representation. I've been very open about that as MLA. I was during the campaign when asked. It's an area that I believe deeply in and that I hope the referendum passes on, because I really think to build back that cynicism, to gain people's trust once again in the political system, we have to try something different. We have to give an opportunity for a different kind of electoral system. And this is the public's chance. This is their opportunity. So it's a pretty exciting initiative.
And what's different about this referendum? I know people talk about the referendums in 2005 and 2009. So what do you say to people that bring those up and say that it might not pass?
It's a really important point. And I think that the important piece in this is that the referendum will be based on a 50% plus one. So previous referendums were at a supermajority and they had to have 60% in constituencies across the province. We've said we get elected by 50% plus one, whoever gets the most votes. We believe that's a referendum threshold as well. So it will be a basic majority rules, and it'll be a chance, as I said, for the public to engage. There'll also be yes and no campaigns. People will have an opportunity to be able to look at the models, to look at the questions, to pick out what they think is the right direction to go. So I hope people engage. This is their chance. This is their, again, piece of history. We've shown a piece of history when it comes to a minority government in partnership with our Green caucus. Now we've got another chance to be able to show history.
Absolutely. And the government's going to be campaigning on the yes side?
The individual MLAs will be out there, government will be out there. The Attorney General will stay neutral. We need to ensure, because of voter fairness, that there's neutrality there. The Attorney General in his role will stay neutral, and then we're going to go ahead and engage in the conversation.
That's great. Well, we only have a few minutes left, so I want to go to the photos you brought today. Can you tell us what's going on here?
This is swearing in, as you can tell, a pretty emotional day. It was very exciting to be able to be part of a cabinet and part of a government that was showing a piece of history. This is Fort Street Cleanup Day.
Looks like a fun day.
It was a fun day. The businesses on Fort Street do an amazing job. They all come together, do a scrub up Fort Street. My community office is on Fort Street, as people may know when they look at the information. So this was a chance to get involved, do some sweeping, and support the small businesses. This is Canadian Citizenship Day, and this was on Canada on July 1st, which is always a very emotional day. And with our anniversary, with Canada's anniversary, the 150, of course, it was extra special. So always a proud day to be a Canadian. This is Pride, again, one of the largest parades. My colleagues, Mitzi Dean from Esquimalt-Machosen and Rob Fleming from Victoria Swan Lake, a great event and a great celebration that's become a celebration for the entire community.
I love that boa.
It only comes out at Pride. This was Labor Day, again, Mitzi Dean, my colleague, and Lana Popham from Saanich South. They're greeting people on the legislative lawns to celebrate labor and the big difference they've made on everything from the stat holidays to 5-day weeks to the kinds of health and safety issues where they really made a difference. And this was Orange Shirt Day. This is a very emotional day. This is to recognize people, survivors of residential school, as well as those who didn't survive. You will see Eddie in there somewhere, and Christina, who have done an extraordinary job, who've done an extraordinary job in making Orange Shirt Day such a large recognition across our province, and it's a very important day. This is a Chamber of Commerce, and as Finance Minister, I go around to Chambers of Commerce and I finish my tour tour in Victoria, the Chamber of Commerce in Victoria.
Okay, well, it's been wonderful talking to you, but I'm afraid we're out of time. This has been Constituency Report on Shaw TV, and we've been talking today with MLA for Victoria Beacon Hill, Carole James. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Great to be here, and thanks to the people of Victoria Beacon Hill.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time on Shaw TV.